Levi here, the Outdoor Cowboy, and welcome back to the Outdoor Cowboy YouTube channel. And today, we're going to be talking about knives. We're going to be covering the basics and everything you need to know about knives. We're going to be talking about different kinds, how to use them, how to take care of them, and how they can save your life when you're in the outdoors or in a survival situation. So let's slice right into this video and saddle up for the ride. Alright, today we're going to be covering 7 things about knives. We're going to be talking about why they're important. We're going to be going through a bunch of different kinds and shapes and sizes of knives, talking about what their strengths are so you can know which one will be best for you. And then most importantly, we're going to be talking about how to be safe while using your knife and taking care of it so that it can be a tool for you when you're in the outdoors and so you can use it correctly. So the first thing we need to talk about is why a knife is important for a survival situation. And it really comes down to just how versatile a knife is. There are obviously a lot of tools that are really nice to have when you're in the outdoors. Saws, axes, utensils, anything like that. They're all super nice to have, but pretty much all of them in one way or another can be replaced by a knife. And that's why knives are so important. They're small, but they have so many uses. Your knife can be a weapon if needed. It can be used as a tool for cutting things, to set up your shelter. It can be used to prepare your food. It can be used to get tinder for your fire or kindling. And it can also be used to chop wood if needed. So a knife really has so many uses, from survival to first aid to fire starting. Most things that you need in the outdoors can be done with a good knife. So that's why it's important to find a good knife. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about is different kinds of knives. So I'm going to go through some of the knives in my knife collection. I have more knives than I could ever use, but I really like knives. I try to collect them when I go to different places. And there'll be a video in the future of going through every knife I have and kind of talking about them. But today we're just going to cover some of the knives I have, just with some variety in them, and just be talking about them, maybe some of their strengths and weaknesses, and just different characteristics that they have. And we're gonna split our knives into 2 groups, which I think is just most important. And that's gonna be fixed blade knives and folding knives. So we'll start off with our folding knives, or more commonly called pocket knives, and we'll be talking about them, and then we'll move on to our fixed blade knives and talk about them. So our first knife is gonna be my Kershaw that I carry every day. This is a knife that I just have on me just because it's super slim and it stays pretty sharp. And it's also light and versatile, also green, which makes it even better, so that's my favorite color. So this is just a knife I carry every day. It flips out like that. It's got a spring in it, which is really nice, but nothing too fancy, just keeps it simple. Our next knife actually came in our survival kit from the video we did a little while ago, and it's this more tactical knife. You can see that on the blade it has a serrated edge, which can be nice for sawing stuff. This one also has a window breaker and a seatbelt cutter on it. So a little bit more of a tactical knife that maybe has some more uses, but still just a simple folding blade just like that, folds up really small. And I usually find that when knives try to get all fancy like this with all these things on it, it kind of takes away from it just being a knife. So I don't usually use these or carry these, but they look really cool, have a lot of cool uses, and can be really fun to have. Next, I just want to give a shout out. My wife got me this cool knife for our 2-year anniversary just a little while ago. It looks really cool, means a lot, and is just a really cool collectible. So love it. All right, and then our next and second to last knife is this Uncle Henry knife. That was my dad's hunting and survival knife, but since he passed, I carry it now. Just an awesome knife. It looks a lot like the Buck 110 knife, which is a super famous knife. Just super good quality, no play in the hinges at all, which is a good sign of a good knife. Blade stays sharp for super long, and it's got a really cool elk horn handle. So I love this knife. It's skinned a lot of animals, has a lot of experience in the outdoors, and has never done me wrong. All right, and then the last one we'll touch on is just our classic razor blade. These come in handy for a lot of little things, so I thought I'd just give it a shout out. Obviously not a survival knife. The blades would break too easily, but just a super calming folding knife. And the YouTuber Jerry Rig Everything's a good friend of mine, and he makes these knives. So if you're looking for a good razor blade, definitely go check him out. So those are just some of the folding knives that I have. Obviously, like I said, I carry this one every day, so it obviously has to have some positives. They fold up super small, they can be super light, which is great, but the most common place that these knives fail is right at the hinge, which is their biggest weakness. So these things are great because they fold up, and this is often a knife I carry as a backup just because of how small it is, but I usually carry a fixed blade knife because you won't have that issue. So let's jump into our fixed blade knives. All right, and for our first fixed blade knife, we have this super cool National Wild Turkey Federation knife that I've had for a little while. Super cool, just nice fixed blade with a wood handle. Got some cool printing on there, and it comes with a cool case. Just a really awesome knife that I love, and a cool foundation that's all about science-based conservation and hunters' rights, so really like this knife. All right, and then our next fixed blade knife is a really cool one. It is a Buck Alaskan Guide knife, which just has a really cool, unique handle, has a really nice skinning hook, which comes in handy for animals, and it just stays super sharp. So I love this thing, and I've taken it on many hunting trips. All right, and then for our second to last fixed blade knife, we have this really cool knife that I got while I was in Texas, and it just has some really cool elk on it. Really cool engravings in the blade and in the handle. Not a super strong knife, not one that I take out. It's pretty dull, but just goes to show that knives can be really cool items that you can collect and can have personality to them. So I love this one. All right, and then our last fixed blade knife is probably the knife that you guys have seen the most if you watched my channel, and it is the knife that I forged out of leaf spring. And I just love this knife. You can see that it's super thick, super durable. This thing will never break. And like I said, a fixed blade knife is super awesome because it doesn't have a hinge to break at. And especially when it's nice and thick like this, it's definitely not gonna break. So that's why this is my survival knife, just because it's got some good weight to it, so it can work to hack branches off, anything that I need for that. But it's also super durable, which is one of the most important things when you're in the outdoors. To have equipment failure is super hard because you can't just bring a ton of backups and things with you when you're trying to pack light or when you're hiking in. So having gear that you know won't fail is super important. So those are just some different kinds of knives, just some knives from my collection. There's tons more shapes and sizes and brands, and you really just got to find the one that you like, the one that you think looks cool, and the one that's durable, and it'll work for you just fine. And we talked a little bit about characteristics of knives, and that's the third thing we're going to hit on, is what to look for in a quality survival knife, or just the things that makes a good knife. So first thing we talked about is having a foldable knife versus a fixed knife. Foldable knives are great because they can fold up super small, but it might be a place for failure. We also looked at different blade types, where some of them have serrated edges and some of them are just completely a blade. And we also see different shapes and sizes. This is obviously a really big knife with about a 6 or 7 inch blade. This one's a little bit smaller with about a 3 or 4 inch blade. We see different curves. This one has a skinning hook on it, or we see different shapes of knives. So this one has a very curved edge. This one's a little bit flatter of an edge. And we also see different handle shapes as well. This one has a very curved handle, but it doesn't have huge finger notches. Well, this one has a really nice finger notch that your pointer finger fits right in there and is super comfortable. So just up to preference for you. So these characteristics are all important, but they vary a bunch. So you really just need to find what you need in a knife and what'll work best for you, and get the knife that works for you. And again, for me, when I'm survival camping, I always have my knife on my belt just for quick and easy access. And I just like a really durable knife with a little bit bigger of a blade in case I need to chop through some wood, and I know that it won't break on me. But even with that big knife, I usually have a backup just in case. So those are some of the characteristics and features that make a good knife for when you're in the outdoors or out survival camping. So it's up to you to figure out what you need in a knife and find the best one for you. And so now you know what to look for in a knife, and you've got your knife. We now need to talk about how to safely handle your knife. And we're just going to go through a couple things really quick, but this is super important. If you have a knife when you're in the outdoors or out survival camping, the only thing worse than breaking or losing your knife is causing any accidental harm to your body with your knife. You can cut yourself, stab yourself, anything like that can be catastrophic when you're in the outdoors. So knowing how to properly use your knife is super important. The first thing is always make sure to cut away from yourself. Whether you're trying to get wood shavings for tinder for your fire, or just trying to shave down a stick to use to stab your food, anything like that, making sure that you're cutting away from yourself is super important, because if the knife slips, it'll just go into the air. Whereas if you're cutting towards yourself, if the knife slips, obviously your body's right there to stop your knife, which is not what you want. So that's our first one. Second one, making sure that you're gripping the knife properly. Obviously don't grip the blade. Make sure that your hand is only on the handle and that you have a good grip of it before you ever start using your knife. Next one is proper storage, making sure you have a nice sheath for your knife, or just somewhere to store it where you don't just have an open blade, where you can obviously touch the knife anywhere and it's not going to cause any harm to you. And when you're ready to use it, you take it out of the sheath and handle it properly. Another thing is to make sure to never use your knife as a pry bar. So never stick it in something and try to lift it up, whether you're trying to get a stick or a rock out, because you can snap the end of your knife. And then it makes it a lot harder to use as a good tool because you have a dull edge or part of your blade broke off. And then the last thing applies mostly if you're with other people, but if you're in scouts, you should have learned this, and that's called the blood circle. So obviously when you're using a knife, people shouldn't be really close to you. So your blood circle is basically your effective range with a knife, where people shouldn't come in just to avoid any chance of harm. Obviously, if you're being smart with your knife and handling it properly, you shouldn't have any worries, but it's just best to take precautions so that nothing can happen. So to find your blood circle, what you do is you hold the back of your blade, obviously not the sharp end, and then you'll fully extend your arm and spin around in a circle. So obviously this tree's in my blood circle, but you do a full circle, and that's kind of the range that people should stay out of if you have a knife. And then the last thing with properly using your knife is to make sure that it stays sharp, which that's the fifth thing we're going to talk about, is just how to take care of, maintain, and sharpen your knife. Which the first one is just pretty simple, and it's just making sure to take care of it. If you use your knife, make sure to not leave it out. If it gets wet, make sure to dry it off so it doesn't rust. If you get food on it or anything like that, making sure just that your knife is clean at all times will make sure that your blade is strong and sharp, and it will make sure that it can be a tool that you can depend on when you're in the outdoors. The second thing we'll touch on is oiling your blade, which when I forged the other knife, I had to oil it, which just fills in the pores of the metal and makes it so it lasts longer. And in one of my first videos when we restored some axe and hatchet heads, after we got all the rust off of and sanded them down, we oiled them. So if you're wondering how to do that, go check that video out. But that can just make your knife last way longer and be way more protected. And then the last thing is actually keeping your knife blade sharp, which there's kind of 2 points to it. One is making sure to not do things where it will dull your knife quickly. So if you're like cutting through something, don't have like a hard surface like concrete or rock below it, because that'll dull your knife quickly. And just don't put your knife too much in the rocks and the dirt and the sand, because that'll dull it quickly as well. And then the second thing is obviously your knife will never stay completely sharp if you're out using it. We can never completely stop the dulling of our knife. If we do those things we talked about, we can slow it down, but your knife will get dull if you use it. So it's important sometimes to be able to sharpen your knife and know how to do that. My favorite thing is just this pocket sharpener that I have. So you pull this out and then it just clips together like that, and it has a coarse and a fine side. And this can be used either wet or dry. So I really like this thing just because it's light, and I usually keep it in my backpack if I need it. But the most common thing would be some sort of sharpening stone. So here's a little one I have, which it has a thing for the edge of your knife right there in the middle. And then it just has a coarse top that you can sharpen your knife with. And this is nice because it's super small, but they make sharpening stones a lot bigger that are really nice for sharpening all your knives. Some of them are wet where you use water or oil on there as well, and it'll sharpen your knife really well. But all of them work great to keep your knife sharp and to make sure that it's a tool that can be useful to you when you're in the outdoors. So now that we have our survival knife that works for us and we know how to be safe with it, we're going to be talking about just a couple techniques that I think are important. There are a ton of techniques and a ton of ways to use knives, but I just want to touch on 3 of them real quick. The first one is just going to be shaving wood. And this is just pretty simple, just taking shavings off of a piece of wood with your knife, oftentimes to get tinder for a fire. Just being able to shave something down is super important, and it's a great skill to do, to be able to understand your knife, be able to know how it works, and to practice key things. Our second one is going to be carving with your knife, which this one is an awesome one. A lot of times when I'm in the outdoors, I don't bring like a cooking stick with me, so I'll just find a stick and carve down the end into a sharp point. That way I can stab the food and use it to cook over the fire. So something as simple as that, but also carving can turn into making a lot of fun projects. I remember in Scouts, the first thing that we did was we took a bar of soap and we all had to carve different things out of it, which is just a really fun thing to do. Obviously soap is super easy to carve, a lot easier than wood to carve, and you can just let your imagination run wild in what you can carve and make some awesome things. And then the third thing is going to be feather sticking, or just making a feather stick, which this is just another way to create good tinder for your fire and get a fire started. But I just wanted to point this one out specifically because it's unique, but it's really helpful if you have damp wood that you need to get started. This can create little thin pieces that will dry out quickly and light, but it's still connected to your wood, so it helps the other wood light as well and dry out at the same time. So those are some of the techniques that I think are most important with knives, but there are really so much more, and it definitely is something that takes practice. Once you get your knife, you should definitely use it in different situations, so when you're in the outdoors, you're able to use it as the best tool it can be. And now we're on to our 7th and final point in talking about the basics of a knife. And this one is just a common myth that I think a lot of people have, and it's just debunking that. And so the myth would be that a dull knife is safer than a sharp knife, because right, you can't cut yourself. But a sharp knife is actually safer than a dull knife, and it all comes down to predictability. So if you think about, you have your knife and you have a piece of wood, let's say you're carving something into it or taking shavings off. If you have a super sharp knife, it's going to cut right through the wood, right? Which is exactly what you want it to do. And so you're going to know that. If you have a dull knife though, it's going to catch in the wood and you're going to have to apply a lot of force, and the knife might break, or it might slip and catch a bunch of wood. And if you're not ready, then your fingers might be in the way of the knife. And most of the time, even if the knife is dull enough to catch in wood, it's still sharp enough to cut you. So that's why having a sharp knife is safer than having a dull knife. And it really just goes to show of how important it is to take care of your knives, so that you know that they'll work when you're in the outdoors, that they won't break and you won't be stranded without a knife, and they'll work properly and be predictable, which are all super important things. So just like that, that is the basics of knives. Everything that you need to know to pick the right knife, to take care of it, to use it safely, and for it to just be the best tool when you're in the outdoors. I really can't stress how important a knife is, just how many uses it has when you're in the outdoors, but also how important it is to know how to use it and take care of it so that your knife is just a tool for good. So I hope you enjoyed the video, learned some things about knives, saw some of the knives in my collection, some of the knives that I love. And always remember, this is what I told my wife, you can never have too many knives. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on the new videos. Go check out the Outdoor Cowboy merch. A portion of all sales from the merch goes to support some awesome organizations that are doing some incredible things to preserve our outdoors, which we love that. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. If you like this video, make sure to check out the Outdoor Cowboy YouTube channel. We've got new videos every week, survival adventures, camping projects, tool restorations, and a whole bunch more. Hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.